research. In fact, you may have been the principal draftsman of this report on Iran as a state sponsor of terrorism.
Right.
It's August of 2024. Joe Biden is sounding, and Lindsey Graham sound like it's 40 years ago. Is Iran today a state sponsor of terrorism?
Not like we portray it. And what I mean by that is our image of Iran as a sponsor of terrorism was formed in the 1980s when Iran was behind the bombing of first the U.S. Embassy in April of 83, and then the Marine Barracks in November of 83, and then the embassy annex in Beirut again. They were kidnapping American citizens. Now, Iran was doing this not because they hated our freedom, hated our democracy. It was a reaction to what the United States was doing militarily in Lebanon, among other things. We were killing Lebanese Muslims, and Iran was already mad at us for having overthrown their government back in 1954. So, but the common refrain in the United States is that Iran is the biggest sponsor of international terrorism, and they ascribe that to the fact, well, they provide financial support to Hamas and Hezbollah. Okay, look at Hamas and Hezbollah. We've talked about this before. Hamas, in terms of its terrorist record, according to the Israeli government, not according to Larry Johnson, has carried out very, very few attacks, and those attacks are primarily revenge attacks or attacks on settlers. They are not mass casualty events. So Iran has shifted its actions. They're a state, but they're not out using terrorism as a tool. And in fact, they've been very instrumental in helping Syria fight against radical Islamists that are out actually doing the beheading of people.
You say radical Islamists. You mean radical Zionists, or do you mean radical Islamists?
I mean radical Islamists, like ISIS. So ISIS, for example, was out, attacking the Kurds. And normally the Kurds and the Iranians don't get along, but this is one of those instances where both Iran and the Kurds were both out trying to kill ISIS, and ISIS was in turn trying to kill them. So the ISIS, the ultra orthodox in the Sunni community, Iran, as you know, is a Shia Islam. So now my point is, and we wrote that memo that you referenced. We did that first one in 2017. Ray McGovern and I, as part of the Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. But Iran is not this major sponsor of terrorism. We're using that as an excuse. And because when you sit down and total up the terrorist attacks, they just don't add up. And in fact, I think of the top 14 groups that the United States identified as representing a terrorist threat to the United States, 13 of them are Sunni. None of them are backed by Iran, and the other one that was listed on there was not Iranian-backed either.
Is Hezbollah a tool, a proxy of Iran, or is Hezbollah now part of the government of Lebanon?
Yeah, it's the days of Hezbollah being an Iranian proxy are long gone. Hezbollah is its own entity. It's a political entity. It's a military entity. It's a force within the government in Lebanon. It doesn't control Lebanon, but it certainly controls the South. And to pretend that it's just some ragged band of terrorists, during the 1980s, you had this fellow called Ibn Mughniya, who was a Lebanese Muslim, but he was closely aligned with Iran. Yeah, he was bin Laden before there was a bin Laden. Okay, he was a terrorist mastermind in terms of planning attacks, but his attacks were focused on U.S. government, U.S. military, and then they went after civilians who were there in Lebanon that they viewed as agents, as assets of the CIA. That was one of the reasons they were kidnapping them back then.
What is the credibility